What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to TTP Sports. And tonight was the first night of the Stanley Cup Finals. After a long stretch of no hockey for a couple days, the Stanley Cup Finals are finally underway. The St. Louis Blues taking on the Boston Bruins. And tonight was Game 1 in Boston, TD Garden. The atmosphere was electric. Boston on their little 140-day stretch of not winning a championship. Their last championship was this recent Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. Boston fans are very desperate for another championship, looking to win a Stanley Cup in this series. St. Louis Blues haven't been to the Stanley Cup Finals since 1970, actually against the Boston Bruins, where they got swept. So St. Louis Blues coming into this game have not won a Stanley Cup Final game in their franchise history. A lot of St. Louis players never been to the Stanley Cup Final. You got the Boston Bruins. They have a ton of players on their team who have been to the finals and won it back in 2011 against the Vancouver Canucks. And pretty exciting game, even though the St. Louis Blues, they kind of got their asses kicked. I'm going to say that right now. Boston Bruins, they take care of business. They take care of game 1. They win it 4-2 after, basically kicking the Blues' ass throughout the majority of this game. The Blues had no business of being in Boston tonight's game. It was just total dominance out of the Bruins the entire night. And early on in this game, the Blues have some life in them. The Blues have some life in the first period, as right before the commercial break, Braden Shen gets open in the slot and he buries it past Tuukka Rask for a 1-0 St. Louis lead. And throughout the first period, it's pretty much back and forth between both teams, but it looks like St. Louis has more of the... They're more aware, they're more on their feet. They look like they're getting the pucks faster than the Boston Bruins. The Bruins look like they still have rust on them from having that extended days off from sweeping Carolina. They had at least, I think, a 10-day gap between the conference finals and this first game of the Stanley Cup Finals right now. So you can literally tell that Boston was a little rusty coming into this game, that leads to a St. Louis scoring and taking an early lead in this first period. And then really it ends there, 1-0, really back and forth. It's really tight checking. And early on in the second period, a really miscommunication, I would say, from Boston, Pastrnak and Chara. Pastrnak goes behind the net. He drop passes it, expecting Char to be there, but Char doesn't go behind the net. He instead goes in front of Tuukka Rask. And then Braden Shen reads that mistake from Boston, takes it away, and then passes it right to Vladimir Tarasenko, who is in the slot, who buries it right past Rask to make it 2-0 St. Louis. And from here, an early goal in the second period, and you have a 2-0 lead. It looks like St. Louis is pretty much going to run away with this game, but really, like not even a minute later, Boston responds right back. They get a little bit of an odd man rush, and Corelli, it's really the depth from Boston that really shows up in this game. Not really so much from, I would say, their first line of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak. It's really the depth that's stepping up this game. You got Corelli, and you passing it off to Connor Clifton, who had Jordan Binnington beat. He had him off of his angle, and it's a really fluky goal. The pass goes right to Clifton. It really hops off his stick and over the paddle of Jordan Binnington into the net. So you really can't fault Binnington on that one. He was just out of position, and he just really missed a swat with his stick off the puck. It just flew right over his stick and into the net. So from there, Boston gets life, and they really start to bring it to St. Louis. It's really bad at this point right and now that you could see Boston is starting to wake up. They're starting to get the rust off, and they're just bringing it to St. Louis right now. And St. Louis really wasn't disciplined this game. They took, I think, 10 penalty minutes in this game in total, and there was a really bad penalty taken during the middle of the second period. It was Oscar Sundqvist in center ice. He really just cross-checked Clifton from behind. It was an unnecessary play. It was an unnecessary hit. You were hitting a defensive player, and that's going to give you a penalty. And right off of that power play, Charlie McAvoy halfway through it walks right into the St. Louis zone and then buries it right past Jordan Binnington to tie the game at 2. And off the replay, you can kind of see, right as the shot was about to happen, it deflects right off the stick of Alex Pietrangelo, But you can also see from the reaction of Jordan Binghamton, he knows he should have had that, but it also can probably think that he's probably also mad that his defender was probably the reason the goal happened, but can't blame your defense. Well, you can't really blame anything because the goal happened, but he's a little mad at himself right there that he allowed that goal to go in. It went a little bit right above his blocker, so 2-2 game right there. And as I said earlier, Boston really took control of this game right from there. If just outplaying St. Louis in every aspect of the game. They were out-chancing St. Louis. At the start of the third period, they were out-chancing St. Louis like by 20-3, and they were out-shooting St. Louis by, I think, almost double at this point. I think St. Louis at the end of the second period only had 11 shots on net, and I think Boston had at least 25 shots on net. So that really shows like how much Boston is just taking it to St. Louis right now. And then going near the beginning of the third period, a really terrible neutral zone turnover by Edmondson of St. Louis. He really had the open ice to bring the puck up, but he just decided to, I'll just throw it along the neutral zone, someone will get it, and turns it right over to Boston actually, and Boston comes in. They get a little shot off of Jordan Binghamton. It looks like it goes off his paddle, then it goes off of one of the defensemen. I think it was Edmondson, and it goes right on the stick of Sean Corrali, and he buries it to make it 3-2 Boston, and that's all she wrote from there. Going to the end of this game, St. Louis decides to call a timeout with 2 minutes left. They decide to pull Jordan Binghamton right after that. And the Blues, they get their share of chances on that little spurt of an empty net with a 6 men on. But Boston shows they're the better team defensively, and they bring it up the ice. Brad Marchand buries it into the empty net, and it's 4-2. And that's how the game finishes. So, like I said, Boston really kicked the asses of St. Louis in this game. St. Louis had no business of competing in this game whatsoever. It's just after that first period, after they gave up that goal to Clifton, it just wasn't anything going for them. It looked like, the St. Louis Blues, they were out hitting them. That's how St. Louis plays. They're going to get into the dirty areas and they're going to play physical. They were doing that, but they were just getting outplayed in mostly every aspect of the game. They weren't getting to loose pucks. They weren't winning chances, and when Jordan Binghamton was coming up with saves, and they wouldn't really help him out a little bit. They were kind of leaving Jordan Binghamton out to dry. But for as good as Jordan Binghamton has been playing, he's not going to stop every puck, and that's what happened in this game. So Boston wins 4-2, and the real question was going into the start of the series for both teams actually was, for Boston, how long was it going to take for the rust to wear off? Like, how long was it going to take for them to get into the game? Because, they had that long lapse of not playing any games. They had at least a 10-day off stretch since they swept Carolina in the conference finals, and they had to wait for who won out of St. Louis and San Jose. That took 6 games, so Boston had a really long stretch of off days, and they did have some scrimmage games here and there just so they weren't too rusty, but it did show in the first period that they were a little rusty, but they worked out of it, and they managed to dominate St. Louis throughout this game. And the question coming in for St. Louis, experience. Was experience going to play a factor in this finals? Because there's a lot of players on St. Louis who have never experienced the Stanley Cup Finals, let alone going this far in the playoffs. Especially players like Jordan Binghamton. This is his first season in the NHL. He hasn't even played a full season. He came into on this team when they were dead last in the NHL, and he was one of the main reasons they are in this spot right now. And I'm going to say he looks fine right now. He looks sharp. He wasn't the reason St. Louis lost this game. Yeah, he probably could have stopped maybe the second or the third goal, but I'm not really going to put blame on Jordan Binghamton. I'm going to put blame on the rest of the team because they really didn't play good in front of him. And I think that's where experience is coming in right now, because the Blues, they looked ready coming into this game, but then they just lost it. That's where experience comes in. You got to maintain pressure. You got to maintain just consistent play, and that's what they didn't do. They didn't play a full 60 minutes. They played, I would say, 20 minutes. They played the first period, and then they died the rest of the way. So it's game one. You learn from it. You learn that experience, and then you come into game two ready for game two, ready to make a statement, because game two is going to be a statement for St. Louis, whether or not they are ready for this series or not, because Even though it's one game, sometimes one games can decide a series, but in the NHL it's unpredictable. So St. Louis can probably come back in game 2 and probably make a statement and beat Boston in TD Garden. We don't know yet. So for the Blues, they have to refocus, get back into shape, and get ready for Wednesday night. So what are you guys' thoughts on this game? What are you guys' thoughts on the Stanley Cup Finals? Who do you guys think is going to come out on top? And who do you just want to win in general? So don't forget to leave a comment. Don't forget to drop a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, boys. And I'll see you in the next video.